has joined us this evening. This is our first session for the Spring Parent Academy, and our topic today is recognizing trauma in children. And we have a guest, our presenter, and I'm going to let him introduce himself in a few minutes. But before we get started, I just wanted to make sure that folks that are on the call this evening understand our etiquette and our norms and how the meeting will flow. But I also will be interpreting this information in a few minutes. We will have an interpreter throughout the meeting, the Zoom meeting. So, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Janet Pichardo. Gracias por asistir a la Academia de Padres de Primavera. Ahora mismo nosotros tenemos un invitado. Él va a hablar sobre el tema de trauma en los niños. Entonces, en este momento, en un ratito, voy a mencionar algunas normas para nuestra reunión de esta tarde. So in front of you in the screen, you'll see just a few points that I wanted to address. So questions will be answered throughout the presentation, and we will have a question and answer portion. Whenever our presenter, says that they may be interested in, taking some questions, or we will say that we have several questions and we have folks that are raising their hand, then we will let our presenter know this, and we'll pause for some questions. So we want to make sure that you can see at the very bottom of your screen, specifically for our Spanish-speaking attendees tonight. I will start off by letting you know that you will need to, how they can access our interpreter that has joined us. Por favor, para las personas que no están asistiendo esta tarde, que necesitan traducción a español, por favor miren hacia abajo de su pantalla y van a mirar donde dice interpretación. Dice en inglés interpretation. Y de ese modo ustedes van a poder presionar ese icono y entonces presionar el idioma español. Ese es el idioma que tenemos disponible esta tarde. Por favor, si pueden hacer eso en este momento, el resto de la reunión voy a dar la información en inglés. Entonces, de nuevo, la intérprete va a traducir durante la reunión completa. And so, again, we are working with an interpreter for this session. So thank you for your patience with possible slight delays in some of the content delivery. We want to make sure that all attendees are receiving the information. You should also know that this is a webinar format. And so that means that you will only be able to see us on your screen and not everyone that's on the call right now. We have about 43 people on the call, and it's going to continue to grow because we just sent out a reminder notice via text to all of our families. And also so that you know that everyone will be muted. So all your microphones are muted until we start taking questions and answers. And those individuals who prefer to raise their hand to ask their question live, you are able to do that. And you can do that in English or in Spanish. And so we'll make sure, to call you out and unmute you at that point. And so, Delia, are you all set? Delia Rodriguez Maswan is our interpreter. Are you all set, Delia? Delia? Yeah, she's, okay, you're good. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So I am going to now introduce Ashley Reyes. So actually, I'll let you go ahead, and I'm gonna, let me just close my screen here.
Thank you, Janet.
Of course. Okay, hold on. Ashley, let me know if you are able to. Let me see.
I think once you stop, I'll be able to share the screen.
Okay.
Perfect.
And just so you know, Ashley and Dr. Booth, I will, in between, like every 15 minutes, I'll try to come in and remind folks that are coming in now who did not hear the instructions on how to access the interpretation, okay? Just to remind them, okay?
Absolutely.
Go right ahead.
Well, thank you for having us. My name is Ashley Reyes, and I am a project manager for the Children and Youth Cabinet of Rhode Island. We are a community organization that's a nimble intermediary. What that means is we bring together residents, public systems, and community organizations and funders to act on a series of prevention programs and initiatives for our community. Today, we are here to, with Dr. Booth, to offer one of our trauma sessions. This is all possible from the work that we've been able to do with the community. At the end of the presentation, I will leave up some slides on 2 of our family programs. For more information, there's contact information on those slides, and you can outreach if you're interested. So, Dr. Booth, if you'd like to start.
Sure. How's everyone doing? My name is Dr. Richard Booth, and I am a Jamaican immigrant who grew up in inner city Boston, late 80s, early 90s. I was around a lot of trauma, dysfunction, violence, community violence. And when I grew up and got into my profession of mental health counseling therapy, I made a concerted effort to want to give back to communities that were similar to mine, because the norms and understandings of how trauma impacts us isn't as understood as I thought. So I am a licensed mental health counselor. I'm a clinician at Brown University and in private practice.
Jonathan.
And I have a PhD in counseling psychology and school psychology. And I've worked extensively with communities of color, inner city communities, and a wide range of people. And I enjoy doing trainings, and I enjoy working with communities to let them understand what's going on with us, our children, our communities, and what are some things that we could tangibly do once we bring an awareness of health, trauma, anxieties, and how it's impacting us. So I'd love to thank everyone. And when I do trainings, I usually start off with 3 assumptions. So the assumptions ground us in our communication so that we understand each other and that we're coming from a similar place. So the first assumption is that everyone here cares. You're here because you care. You want to make a difference. You want to help. So the first assumption is that you care. The second assumption is that we have many roles. Oftentimes we have so many roles that overlap and interplay with each other that where one starts and where the other starts is unknown. A lot of our roles are given to us and we fall into them. And what my purpose is to help enhance knowledge in some of the roles. So there's a lot of mental, physiological, neurological understandings of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that I feel I'm able to help people bridge the gap so they can understand better some of their roles and how they can help others in their roles. And the third assumption is that you're all intellectual stalwarts. I mean that not to be facetious, not to be condescending, but everyone here is an intellectual stalwart. I'm assuming that because we'll be talking about concepts as well as practical skills and behaviors. And my assumption is that everyone here will be able to understand it and then apply it to their individual life histories. So these concepts that we discuss, these behaviors, are shared amongst large groups of people, but ultimately it will be upon us to internalize them and individualize them to our particular lives stories. So for me in my trainings, I'm very research based. And research says that we as human beings do not learn if someone sits here for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and drones on. So I like for the trainings to be interactive. I like people to talk. If I say something you agree with, please feel free. If I say something you disagree with or have a question about, please feel free. So this will be an open discussion where we go over concepts and behaviors, and I'm expecting a lively discussion where people add themselves to what's going on. So the objectives are for participants to learn how separation, loss, and grief can impact a person, our families, and our communities. We want to increase our understanding of the grieving process and reject the stage model and increase our understanding. Oh, yes, I see a hand raise. On types and ranges of experiences. We want to make sure that when we think of grief, we're working hard to understand that it is a universal phenomena, but is not shared the same by everyone. And by expecting people to act a certain way, to behave a certain way, and if they don't, we judge them negatively, we're doing a disservice to people who are grieving and actually need our help. So, what I'd like to do is have a start to the discussion. And we start off with simply, what do you think of when you hear the words separation, loss, and grief? And I'd love for everyone to feel free to join in the conversation. So, what do you think of when you hear the terms separation, loss, and grief?
Okay, so we have a couple hands raised. So I'm going to start with Mariah. Mariah, you can go ahead.
Hello, hi everyone. Yes, when I think of separation, loss, and grief, I think of being away from my children. I would never want to be apart from my children at all. And I also think of my grandmother, the way I handle the grief is that I try to pretty much not think of her anymore because in
It's too painful.
yeah, it's too painful, and I just wish she was still here, and I just don't want to go down the whys and all the things that she said about living until she's 90, and she only lived to 63, and so I just kind of, which is like a different way because my aunt is like she remembers her, she has pictures and all this,
Yes.
and so I just kind of leave it like that.
You think of your personal relationship with grief. And what we want to do with this training is to let you know that the way you're grieving isn't wrong. Oftentimes, there's this belief that grief is supposed to function a linear way, a certain way. And if you don't grieve the way that healthy people do, or the way that we think you're supposed to, there's a problem. So if you're saying, I don't want to remember because it's too painful, and then I slowly let it trickle out, people might look at you like, you're not supposed to do that. And what I'm here to say is if that's what helps you and makes you able to cope and deal, it's okay. We all will grieve and go through this in our own way. And one way doesn't fit all. I'd love to hear the other hands raised. We have Erica.
Erica, you can go ahead.
Erica's muted.
Yeah, she has herself muted.
Ah.
So we'll come back to you, Erica.
Let's go with Josie.
And I just want to remind folks that if you want to ask your question in English or Spanish, you can go ahead and ask your question in English or Spanish. You can raise your hand and also insert your question in the Q&A. So you have the options there.
Hi there, this is Josie.
Hi.
I think of when I see these words, separation, loss, and grief, I think of fear, because something, I don't know what to expect now. I'm afraid of what comes next.
Mm-hmm. Change. And not just regular change, but cataclysmic change that ruptures or shakes something that we've established as the norms for what we're supposed to have happen. You know, when we're thinking of now, presently, how we're living during a pandemic, I'm immediately reminded of how much of our regular world and our regular connections were taken from us. We grow up with certain level of expectations and norms of how the world is supposed to progress, and with an instant, gone. And now we're forced to reel and come back and try to find ways of making connections in a world that's now new, scary, and different. So when we think of separation, loss, and grief, it might not even be just a person. It might be situations, ideals, and circumstances and memories that we had or expectations of what's considered normal. I'd love to hear from, I see a ST with the hand raised.
Hi, sorry, I meant to pursue Jenny. So when I think about separation, loss, and grief, I think of, feeling lost. I think some folks, when they go through those emotions, they feel lost. For myself, I have several experiences, but the first one that popped in my head when you presented this slide was when I was 4 years old, and our parents, made it out to the United States, and we stayed in the Dominican Republic, waiting for the paperwork to go through so then we can, reunite with them. But it took that process about a year, and for a 4-year-old, without seeing both their parents for a year, I mean, it was really like a shift in the entire foundation. So yeah, that's what I thought about first, and just losing, I felt like I lost something.
And that loss, and now I think of sort of when you say that loss and separation from parents, when the immigrant story, I think of mine, and it was very similar. But at the end, it became something that was reassuring. I talked to my mother about this. I said, "You told us you would come, and you did." And that reinforced my belief that adults and people will do what they say. So a lot of times, even in the loss, there are situations in it that may serve to either reinforce sort of a view of normalcy or that the world could be okay, or even situations that totally upheave that altogether. And it is a ho on Christopher A.
You can go ahead with your comment. All right, we will come back to you. Hold on, Christopher. Just raise your hand again if you have a question or a comment.
So when we think of loss and separation, we need to first ground it in the fact that it's universal. We're all going to experience some form of loss, separation, and grief. But, and here's the big but, it's not uniform. It is a shared experience, and it is a process we all go through, but we will invariably all go through it differently. It will impact us differently, and it will have changes on us that are different based on other experiences that tend to build us and mold us during our formative years. What is our culture? What did our culture say about loss and grief? How do we as individuals process things? What is our genetic makeup and our sensitivities, and what are our needs? And what we have to realize is though it's universal, we have to individualize it and make space for individualized understanding so that when people are hurting and people are in pain, we're able to put ourselves in their shoes and actually try to adapt our understanding to them and what they're going through, as opposed to some preconceived notion about what they are supposed to be doing. So as we look at loss and separation, we can go to the next slide. We could look at two examples, two case studies. So one's a female. She's 8 years old. Maya, she's a third grade student whose parents are currently going through a divorce. She's having trouble sleeping at night, and her father's moved out of her home. Her father had a stroke shortly after leaving their home and was admitted to an hospital. Maya gives her mother trouble when going to school, and when her mother leaves, she gets anxious and has difficulty during transition times during the school day. Maya is experiencing grief, loss, separation. But how is she viewed? How is she treated? When we're looking at, conversely, Jorge, he's a male, 13 years old. He's been placed in a foster home after being detained in a detention center. He and his mother were separated at the border. Jorge started middle school. During the school day, Jorge is withdrawn and doesn't like to open up to anyone. He tends to wander the hall and is constantly late to class. How is Jorge treated, conceptualized? How are people making room and understanding for him and Maya? So what we could do is start having a conversation about that, about how people act when they're grieved. And we could go to the next slide and start looking at it. What similarities do they have in common? When you look at those two, we could even go back so people can have the slides there. What similarities do they have? And I see Christopher A. Your hand's raised. I'd love to hear what you're saying.
You can go ahead. There we
Okay,
go.
thank you. So when you asked the question before, the March 18th is the 14th anniversary of my daughter's death.
Wow, sorry to
Um,
hear.
Thanks. So she was 19 months and 19 days old, and died for no known medical reason. She
Mm.
just stopped breathing one night. And it has been a source of pain and distress for my family for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you asked this question, that was the first thing that came to my mind. And we had a daughter at the time who was 4, who is now 18 years old, and since had another child.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now 10 years old. And unfortunately, my wife and I separated last year, and so there's been a lot of loss and
Mm-hmm.
separation and grief
Yeah.
for me over the last year, for sure.
Yeah. And that's tough. And part of this loss, again, is now exacerbated by a pandemic, by a loss in ability to connect to people that we've had connections to our whole lives. When we're looking at the amount of losses that are piling up, we see that they're not abating. And these losses will impact us for a very long time. And we have to start creating a space where we get out of this model that says it's linear and that says eventually you get over it and your life is better and you move on and everything is a-okay. So as we do this, when we look at examples of this, we start examining what's happening, how are people responding, how are their behaviors indicators that something is wrong, especially when we're dealing with children who have limited words for how to express themselves, who have limited understanding or scope of death, of finality, of the longitudinal lifespan, and how things progress throughout. So as we go through this, create that space where we're understanding each other and ourselves and knowing that grief and loss is not a linear process that happens one way for everyone, and you follow these magic stages, and at the end of it, boom, acceptance, and you're better. That's not realistic, and that's not life. We could go. I'd love to hear from Jessica. Your hand is raised.
Hello, hi. So I'm a mother of 5 kids, and we've been dealing with deportation
Mm-hmm.
in our family. Not me, my kid's father.
Yeah.
Which is really happening more than I think a lot of people know.
Mm-hmm.
He missed the flight last year. He missed it, meaning it filled up very quickly, and he missed it. So when Gina was here, we got a lot of good feedback apart he's still ordered deported to this day, and there is another plane coming, which that actually has impacted my children. One which is an IEP student, and it delayed them a little bit more. Worry right after my grandmother had passed away. And then COVID came and hit us. So it really hasn't been easy.
Yeah.
And, dealing with the kids. I'm a CNA, I'm out of work because my son is actually an IEP student. He needs 100% of my time, patience, and although I'm dealing with it, I know how to cope with it, but to teach the children how to cope with it and get on with their day. And he goes full time to school because he's elementary, but the other ones go A day. So it's like trying to like balance everything and cope with everything, cope with the kids, their attitudes, and try to get through the day as the day is. Not looking really forward to tomorrow, but getting through the day as it is. And it's been really hard.
Excuse me, Dr. Booth, before you respond, thank you, Jessica, for sharing. If I can just remind folks about the interpretation feature, please, because we have several folks that are asking in Spanish in the Q&A. Para las personas que necesitan traducción, por favor, miren hacia abajo de su pantalla y pueden mirar el globo que dice interpretation, interpretación. Cuando presionen el globo, van a tener la opción para elegir español. Entonces le haga clic al idioma en español y van a poder tener acceso a la intérprete que tenemos esta noche. Gracias. Thank you, Dr. Booth.
Thank you very much. And I think that sentiment of just how difficult it is to manage and cope when things pile on is something that we all should really understand and be able to share and really create a space for understanding. When we think of loss and separations, the process or fact of being deprived of or separated from someone or something of value, and it doesn't have to be direct. And sometimes loss and separation doesn't even have to be a person. It could be an ideal, it could be a thought, it could be an expectation of what life was supposed to be. And sometimes it crushes us when things don't turn out the way we thought they were supposed to, or the way we were sold this bag of goods of what normalcy and what life was supposed to be. So when we have difficulties, they can upend us. And as we deal with them and cope with them every day, sometimes it could feel as if they never ever get better and things just pile on and pile on and pile on more. And that is loss and it is trauma. And we have to be aware of that, know that it's happening to us, and as it's happening, not stigmatize ourselves or feel worse because it's happening. I'd love to hear from ST. I see your hands raised.
Oh, I was gonna go back to the question of the previous slide, like what the difference is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was no difference as far as the emotions that they were going through and how they were expressing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were both dealing with grief and loss, but I think that sometimes the way that people approach folks going through things,
Mm-hmm.
I know that with gender,
yes,
they may treat the boy as if man up, or get over it, and then the girl would be more like maybe someone on the outside would approach her more gentle or more, with more TLC than the boy. So I think that's where I see the difference but that's from the outside. But as far as what they're going through, I believe they're going through the same thing. They're just,
expressing it differently.
They may be treated differently is what I'm trying to say.
It's true. Like, we have to acknowledge that this world is not devoid of bias. It's not devoid of expectations. And invariably, if a little girl is expressing herself a certain way, she'll be treated differently. But also, if a young male is acting a certain way, he'll be treated differently. But then we now add gender on top of culture, on top of ethnicity, on top of the narratives that we're told about who's considered valuable or who's not. So it might be okay to be sad because your parents are divorced, but some people might be like, you should be grateful that you're here, and I don't know why you're sad, person who immigrated over here. The narrative might be something that is combative and negative. And when males especially are acting in ways that don't go align with what society expects, especially males of color, the motives and the way they're treated tend to be more negative and more harsh and punitive. So we have to make sure we're aware of these things that are going on with our kids and how they present and how they will be treated. I'd love to hear what Maria has to say. Your hand is raised.
Hi, this is Maria Xavier. I'm a foster mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I been having like 6 foster boys,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a different experience
Yep.
by raising my own children. That was all girls and never been to similar trauma,
Yeah.
and it is a challenge, and is also very different to see how every single kid acts
Mm-hmm.
differently. They
Yep.
took the trauma differently,
Mm-hmm.
and but they all suffering for loss.
And that's the key. Creating
Yes,
that space and understanding so that even if people respond differently, you still hold that space to know that they're suffering. And how do we actually treat people who are suffering when we think they matter? Because a lot of times when we think people don't matter or that their grief and loss isn't valid, we tend to be impatient. I've heard many people, yeah, we can go to the next slide. I've heard many people say things like, it's been 3 years. Why aren't you over it yet? Or it was just a blank loss. And you can insert whatever you want about someone trivializing what you've lost. It was only. And how that is hurting people and preventing them from finding allies or voices that are able to empathize with them. When we think of traumatic loss, it's comprised of separation distress, a yearning, a searching, a loneliness, and traumatic and emotional distress, numbing, disbelief, distrust, anger, emptiness, a sense of futility about the future. You see, when people incur great loss, the future looks different. Your worldview is altered. Worldview is a psychological term that encapsulates how you think the world is and how it's supposed to act. Is it fair? Is it understanding? Is it just? Will things happen in a way that it's supposed to? I grew up inner city Boston, late 80s, early 90s, when the murder rate in Boston was very high. And I remember situations where my life could have been lost just by wearing the wrong hat, just by being in the wrong neighborhood, just by being with the wrong person, or sometimes just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I always felt that this was so unfair because why was this happening to us? Why were our environments so caustic when we didn't ask for this? I could be going to school or coming from school and I might not make it home. So, how does that impact a young developing child's view of the world when they're seeing so much unfairness? We grieve, we hurt, and we feel that loss. We can go to the next slide. So, as we think of grieving and lossing, this is how we want grief to work. We want it to work straight. We want it to be a perfect cause effect. Something bad happens, I grieve, I mourn, I cry, and then guess what? I take approximately however much time that I was given, let's say 3 months, and after the 3 months, I am good. I've processed it, I've tucked it away in this neat bag, and afterwards, I'm refreshed, invigorated, and better. I've accepted it. I'm in a better place. I'm able to love again, feel again, and be vulnerable again, and this is how it is. But that's not the real world. That's not how it works. Grief actually works like the second picture. It's a mess sometimes. Sometimes the way we want to grieve cannot happen. I had a best friend who lost his father. I've known his father my whole life. And we had to go to a Zoom funeral. I had never been to a remote funeral in my life. And it was so hard to watch a family that is my family, grieve over the loss of their father who molded them, who loved them. And I couldn't even say goodbye in a way that I wanted. I couldn't hug anyone to offer comfort in a way that I was used to. So even within the confines of the grief that we're going through, the mechanism for which we share that grief with each other, support each other through that grief, has been taken away. Because I remember I had another close friend who at the funeral found out was family. When he lost his mother, I talked to him a few weeks ago, and he talks about how it still hurts the same. And I said, I agree. And he's like, what? Everyone else is telling me that I should start feeling better. And I'm like, that's them. You don't feel better because people tell you to. You feel better when you feel better. And sometimes you might not for a very long time, or sometimes it might come in and out. You might feel better, then you feel worse again. And all these things are natural and okay. And we have to stop telling ourselves that we should feel a certain way and that we must feel a certain way. Sidebar, people, if you want to live a better, happier, more fulfilling life, please take those two words out of your vocabulary, must and should. They're very harmful to ourselves and our understanding of ourselves and others. It relegates everything we're experiencing to an ideal. And whenever we go up against an ideal, we fall short because it could never encapsulate the entire human experience. So please remove those words, even in grieving. Now, feelings of loss are very personal, and only you know what's significant to you. People commonly associate certain losses with strong feelings of grief, and this includes death. See, death is okay. It's okay if you feel sad and grieving if someone died, and if it's a person. See, if it's a family member, a friend, a classmate, a colleague. A loss of a close friend or partner. See, like divorce, when someone is not there anymore, okay, that's okay for us to grieve. Serious illness of a loved one, that's okay to grieve. Forceful, non-voluntary absence from a loved one, that's okay to grieve, except if the loved one was considered bad, right? So if people who understand foster care, adoption, or anything like that, when people are removed from homes and the children are having difficulties with adapting to the loss of their loved one, a loss of the life that they knew, oftentimes they're met with, why are you so sad? You should be happy that you're not with your neglectful parent anymore. You should be happy that you now have 3 meals a day and access to clean water and a roof over your head and heat in the winter and AC or a fan in the summer. You should be happy that you have a yard. You should be happy you're still with your sibling because you could have been separated. And it really invalidates the grief that they're going through because there is a hierarchy. There is a weighing of grief. And we have to start realizing that this weighing is incorrect. Waleska, I'd love to hear what you're saying. Please, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, let me know, or incorrectly.
Valeska, did you have a question or a comment?
No.
Okay, I'm going to lower your hand.
Thank you. So when we're dealing with subtle or less obvious losses, it can cause strong feelings of grief, even though those around you may not know the extent of their feelings. For instance, separation from someone close. A lot of times I see this with young ones. So you have a couple in high school. They've been together for what they feel like is forever. Their relationship is really intense. And people refer to it with demeaning words like puppy love, like popcorn love. There's a group that I love. I'm from the 80s. I'm a Boston kid. So New Edition's always been like one of my favorite groups. And they have a song called Popcorn Love. And they're these young kids and they're singing about it. And that's how people view the relationships of young people. Even though these relationships might be as meaningful to them as anyone else. But it's assigned to a lesser status. So when people are grieving this loss, they might not get the attention or the caring or the understanding that they deserve. Leaving home, illness, loss of health. You see, if you're healthy and that was taken away, if you lived a life where you didn't have pain and now you do, let's say you were in a car accident, everyone's like, you should be so happy you're alive. And now you have perennial back problems and your back is hurting and every day is a bout of pain, loss of health, limited movement, and you're grieving the loss of the functional you that you used to be. And people are still like, you should be really grateful you're alive. The death of a pet, the change of school status or a job. You see, sometimes change can be frightening. This can cause grief. If you are forced to leave a job that you loved, and again, you found another one. See, if you didn't find a job, people would be like, wow, that's sad, you're unemployed. But if you found another job, but you really miss your old job because that was the only place where you felt effective, it was the only place where you had community, it was the only place where you were connected. How do you explain that loss to people so they could fully understand? When you have to move to a new home, I've had people in tears because they had to move. They love their home. Their whole life and memories were built in that home. All their experiences were in that home. And that home was taken or they had to leave. That loss is considered less important. And it shouldn't be. Loss of financial security. During COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people's lives were changed. There was a movement to shop local, to support your local businesses, to keep them in business. But as I drive around and I see plenty of businesses that are closed, that anxiety, that fear, that loss is real. What do you do when you have a perceived loss that is going to impact every facet of your life? And what is the shame that is associated with it? You see, when we think of grief, loss, we think of shame a lot of times and how people are shamed for having these losses as if they could have controlled it. If you planned better financially, this wouldn't bother you. If you had more savings, if you had this, instead of just being there and saying, it must be hard. And I would like to support you because we care. Now, as we discuss this, I'd love for people to, again, re-engage. I've been talking for a while. So let's re-engage and talk. What are some common instances of loss and separation that our children may be experiencing? Why can loss and separation be experienced differently by children? And can the instances of loss separation be mitigated by age and experience? So can instances of loss and separation be helped by age? Can it be decreased, the impact of it, by education, experience, life? Karina, I see your hands raised. I'd love to hear from you.
Hello, hi, my name is Karina Diaz, and I think one way that our children or even adults can suffer from a separation, not even leaving the house, or is by having depression.
Mhm.
Depression can uh, take a person totally apart from
Yes.
their parents or a family member, and like not everybody understand what that feels like, or
Mhm.
the thoughts that a person with depression can have. And I
And
believe
that's a
that,
physical toll on their body.
yeah, and um, I believe that not everybody understands the concept of it, and sometimes that even makes it worse for the person who suffers from that.
I agree. I think sort of like with grief and separation and loss, when we see physical ailments, there's a societal understanding and there's leeway given. Words like accommodation is used when someone has a physical ailment. If my arm is broken right now and I was trying to get a cup of water and I'm in a cast up to here and I can't, there'll be a line of people to hold the glass for me. There'll be no one sitting there thinking, boy, this guy is lazy. He's a good for nothing because he can't reach that water. What's wrong with him that he can't reach that water? But when people are going through grief, they're going through emotional pain, psychological pain, which is just as debilitating as a broken arm and also has physiological causes. You see, a lot of people don't realize that the brain and the mechanisms of the brain are highly involved in how we move, highly involved in motivation, feelings of efficacy, hope, being able to get up. That is a brain thing, not a will thing. It is a brain thing, not a desire thing. It is a brain thing, not a referendum on the person's worth. Yet it's often linked with that. So when we're thinking of depression and grief, again, create spaces of empathy where we can start meeting people where they're at, where we can start seeing people for human beings who are hurting and make steps to help. And Solomon, I'd love to hear from you. Your hand is raised.
Miss Solomon, do you have a question?
No, I don't. It has to be a mistake. Sorry.
No problem. ST.
Hi again, and thank you. So, you know, in my culture, I'm from the Dominican Republic, as I mentioned earlier. You know, a lot of there needs to be a lot of education on mental health because it's not very recognized and talked about. It's a very taboo subject.
Yeah.
At times you're labeled as either lazy or, you know,
yeah,
you have lack of will.
Mhm.
And, you know, they're not recognizing that the symptoms that you're displaying, you know, like you're not cleaning your house, you're not cooking, you're not doing your regular activities, you're isolated, you know,
Yeah.
these things are not viewed as, you know, what you're going through, which is a depression. And
Yeah.
so I think that in our culture, we need a lot of education. And that's why I've, you know, I'm diving in as a professional,
Nice.
not only so that I can help, you know, the clients that I work with, but also to help my own family members who have suffered from, you know, these, you know, depression, anxiety, and the entire society is suffering from, you know, a sort of level of separation because of COVID. And what I'm hearing is that separation has caused them to isolate, to separate from their families, and to become, you know, depressed. If they didn't have a history of depression, it started with COVID. So yeah, so that's
And
why,
it's
you know,
brain-based. It's physiological. And again, we relegate it to will. We relegate it to value judgments, when if it was a broken arm, it wouldn't be. And we have to realize that with knowledge and understanding that these things are real. And a lot of times people are upset at the symptoms of a depression, right? But if you don't treat the depression, the symptoms will stay. I'd love to hear from Ruben.
Yes, hi. I just have a question. How can I identify when a child is in has depression, or how can I see that?
Ah, beautiful. Well, the first thing I tell is know your child. Know what someone's baseline is. When you build a strong relationship with someone and you create an opening where they feel comfortable talking, they will oftentimes say little things. Like they might say, "Oh, this is just so hard," or they might say, "No one likes me," or they might be in their room a very long time, and you might knock and they go away, or "No one wants to be around me." When people are doing things that are a drastic change from what they normally are, that's usually a sign that something's wrong. But also, there are normative things that we understand of behavior. So if their mood is constantly down and they're moving very slow and they tend to not have an interest in things, their room is really messy. You're like, let's say it's a child, and you're like, why does your room smell like socks feet all the time? You start realizing, hey, something's not going on here. That's normal. And you might sit down and talk, and they might say nothing. But then you see them isolating. You see them having no friends. These are signs that we should get help. We should talk to them more. We should try to engage. But a lot of times when people do that, the initial feeling of hurt because we're trying to help and we feel rejected kicks in. And it might cause us to back away because we don't want to feel hurt. And we don't want to feel as if we're intruding on a person's space. But we have to get past that and understand that this is a sign of the grief, the depression, the loss, the separation. And that when people show us signs that they're hurting, that is not the time to run away because our feelings are hurt. It's a time to really offer support. And we might say things like, I understand you're hurting right now, and you may not see how I can help, but I just want you to know that I'm here anyways. You see, using kind words, empathetic, non-judgment words, not words saying, I know what you're going through, but words that say, I'm here if you let me in any capacity you need. That's what's needed.
How
Not,
about
oh, go ahead.
if there's none of the, let's say, like there is no loss in their life, like let's say they haven't lost any friend or any member of the family, or no separation of the family. Could a child go through a depression without having any of those things? Like,
Oh, yes. Like, think of right now, presently, COVID. There is rarely a person here who could say they haven't experienced a loss. The nestled supports and the connections that we've established as human beings, we need other people to survive. We need connections to other people. We need to be touched. We need eye contact. We need to feel warmth. We need to feel closeness. And we need to feel normalcy. We need to know what to expect and how life is going to progress. And what happened is within an instant, it was taken from us. So now it's don't touch, don't get close. You are potentially a walking bomb that can destroy everyone you know, and everyone else is a walking bomb that could potentially destroy you. We're dealing with an invisible virus that is indiscriminate. And it's caused our relationships to be fragmented, and the supports that we usually have are gone. So even if we don't have a magic identifiable death, the loss and grief and separation from what we usually consider normal, the loss and separation from a regularly expected closeness to other people is diminished. When we look at separation, we look at historical loss, right? We could think of death of loved ones, separation from parent figures, but when we go into the invisible, when we go into historical loss, now there's a lot of historical losses and traumas that have impacted people, and it impacted a group of people, and the messages and the pain from this stays. So if you come from a group that's marginalized, right? Let's say you're Latino and you come from Mexico, Guatemala, and you're watching the news, and a man who's going to run for president of the United States refers to you and people who look like you as all sorts of negative names. And then they instill policies that dehumanize you and create a public discourse that dehumanizes you. It can cause grave feelings of loss and trauma. When you look at being Black in America, the messages that Black people get about themselves and what other people get about themselves. I had read a study a while back that over 75% of all messages people of color get about themselves in the media are negative. When we see images of ourselves being murdered, abused, mistreated, maligned, marginalized over and over and over and over and over again, it traumatizes us. And this is a loss. This is a separation. This is a grieving. And you may not have a magic moment that you could point to and say, this is it, but it permeates society. It impacts us. When you're poor, that is a loss of opportunity. It is a loss of normalcy. I remember I was poor. I did not have the clothes that was coveted. My sneakers had 4 stripes as opposed to the requisite 3 for Adidas. And I was ridiculed, and I felt that loss. I felt the not having. I felt the yearning, the need, the wanting for one stripe to just magically disappear so I could fit in. So people are going through losses, and we don't have to be able to identify what that loss is to still be empathetic and care. Nadia, I'd love to hear what you're saying.
Thank you so much for doing this. I commend you for having this type of workshops for parents. Also, Jenny mentioned before, we come from a culture and a background in which we see mental health as not existence. And well, if I lived through it and I was okay, I'm okay now, you know, and we are in the process of making that change. And that's what we need to do. I think it's very important to have that education for our families, because we do have a lot of people that are immigrated or people that are not aware of what mental health really is, and how can we make that change? How can we implement that in our schools so our kids know that when they're depressed, they need to reach out? How I know that there's some schools that do mindfulness and that they have that conversation. A lot of change needs to happen, especially in the school system. The fact that and I'm not, you know, I work at a school and we have a lot of students that are minorities. A lot of our teachers are white and they are very passionate about their work, but our kids cannot connect to them. They cannot see. We do have a lot of our administration and our teachers are minorities, and they see that example that I can be a teacher, I can be a person, an important person, but it has to start, from our parents. It has to start in our community. That education, that change needs to happen, because especially now, as you mentioned, with COVID and how different our lives are, kudos to those parents that are here and educating themselves and doing the research to help our children. But there's a lot of parents that they're working at this time, they won't be able to get this information, or they just don't believe in it because they think mental health is oh no, they're just manipulating, they just want something. It's not, it's just so important to know that we need these workshops, we need this education everywhere.
I think that's the thing. It can't begin and stop with one workshop in one magic place. It doesn't, okay, here's school, you learn it, you're better. Okay, here's church, you learn it, you better. Here's this program. It has to be a concerted effort where knowledge, shared experiences is given over time in multiple formats in a way people can actually feel and digest. For me, that's why I'm starting this in terms of the brain. I repeat, it is brain, it's neurologically based, it is physiologically based. I remembered when I was helping a friend and their son was working on an assignment. There's this thing called object permanence. So, object permanence is the phenomena that occurs when children learn that just because they can't see something, it still exists. So, when you think of peekaboo, right? Peekaboo, peekaboo. The reason peekaboo works on young children is when you do this, they think you disappear. So when you come back, they're so happy because the loved one, the face that they wanted so much is back and they're happy. So her son had developed object permanence and she was reading about this. And she was like, I need your help, Booth, because I don't believe in this psychology stuff. And I said, that's irrelevant. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, your beliefs has nothing to do with this. Psychology is the study of human thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And we do a lot of research to find out what impacts thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And a lot of this is biologically based, interacting with the environment. So when the concept of object permanence happens, you can believe it all you want, it is still there. If I believe that my finger can bend and you see it bend and someone comes over and says, I don't believe in finger bending, people would look at it as preposterous because they're physiological neurons that are sending signals to my brain to tell my skeletal system to move. But when people say things like, I don't believe your depression, I don't believe your anxiety, and you say to them their limbic system is overloaded because their amygdala is hyper aroused and responding to threats, and it is causing chemicals in their body to be released that puts them on edge and makes them anxious. All of a sudden, that is okay. People think, oh, okay, it's a matter of opinion, and it is not. So we have to start creating these discussions where we start seeing pain, we start seeing emotions, and how trauma, pain, grief impacts us as not a thing that should be stigmatized or even debated as real. We need to accept them as the physiological things that they are and understand there are ways to treat it and there are ways to help support people that go beyond just a cast. Kind words can help. Kind looks can help. Being there, understanding, empathetic can help. And especially when we're thinking about children and the road that we're paving for them, we have to realize that a lot of what we believe about children are myths. See, there's this myth about magic youth resiliency. Oh, it happened to them when they're young, so it's going to be better for them. There's an expectation that children, due to their youth, are inherently more resilient. However, children, after their losses, are often placed in the unenviable position of having to adjust to a dramatic shift in the circumstances of their lives. The rules, the communities, the cultures, the norms, the environments, even their family and living situations, gone, changed forever. And it's a belief of, well, their kids, they don't really understand, or their kids are going to be better. And how terrifying is it to be in a situation where you have no control over and everything is happening to you with no recourse for how you can make it better? Children are expected to thrive in dramatic life-altering events using their individual skills and strengths. But what are their individualized skills and strengths? And how have these skills and strengths been cultivated and practiced and hampered or reinforced? Research in trauma and resiliency show that coping with trauma could be especially difficult for children. See, they don't have the breadth of life experiences that may teach them that trauma is the exception to the rule and not the norm. They don't have the experiences that give them the language for letting people know how they feel. They don't have the experiences of maybe people supporting them and helping them through these tough times. So we have to reimagine what our relationship and health is with other people and be supportive and understand that, especially with children, they're not going to magically be buffered by their age. In fact, that could actually make their lives even harder. So I'd love to hear from 940-2295. I see your hand raised. And thank you.
I think this person had a question about access and translation. So if you all want an interpretation, so if you all want to verbally say it, I saw the response in the Q&A, but Janet or Jonathan, I don't know if you all want to verbally give directions.
So there is a question, but the question is about specifically about how the student is behaving in school. So I'm going to read it out loud.
Yeah.
Hola, me llamo Irma Aguirres, madre de Yosairi Martínez, y quiero preguntar cómo se está portando en la escuela. Señora Irma, si quieres, podamos dejar que hable en persona. So, Janae, if you want to unmute her so that she can go on live. Señora Irma. Irma, Janae, you able to unmute her?
She has her own mic muted.
Okay. Irma, por favor, si te puedes prender su así ya.
Sí. Hola, buenas tardes.
Buenas.
Hola.
Mi nombre es Irma Aguirres, madre de Joarcy Martínez. Y quiero saber cómo se está portando ella en la aula, en la escuela, cómo es su comportamiento.
Entonces, perdón, Irma, so la reunión de esta noche es más sobre trauma en los niños, ¿verdad? Si usted necesita ayuda para facilitar una reunión con la maestra de su niño, nosotros le podamos llamar.
Ok, está bien.
Ok, yo le voy a poner mi teléfono y así usted me llama mañana. Yo se lo pongo en el chat, ¿ok?
Ok, está bien.
Ok, de nada.
Ok, gracias.
De nada.
De nada.
Okay.
Yeah, she just needs some assistance to ask questions regarding her child's behavior at school.
No problem. How about Alice?
Bye.
Bye.
Adiós. Gracias, Irma.
Bye, igual.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. I want to make a statement on the trauma. My son at the time was 12 years old. January 1st, his grandmother died of 2019. July 5th, he was in a really bad car accident. He was hit by a truck riding a bike. The result of that is traumatic brain injury. He had fractures, swelling, and a bleed on the brain. And they're talking that there might be lingering damage in the frontal lobe. Then 2 months later, he lost one pet, and a month later, another pet.
Wow.
So my thing is what you were saying about people just blowing it off like you're lucky to be alive, or it's just a pet, you should be over it.
Yep.
I don't agree with that at all.
Because it's wrong.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
I find it very long. And a lot of people, even in school with the pandemic, he has yet to return back to school, but his teachers and the school staff, they're accommodating him by giving him work on paper because he's having trouble with the Chromebook.
Yeah.
But they're understanding where last year it was his behavior, which he was always a good student, always in class, but last year, he kind of slacked on that. So them not realizing how bad his injury was and what he was going through, one of his doctors had actually gone in and talked to the staff for them to understand. And I think this program is going to be very beneficial for a lot of people, and including myself.
And I think that's an important thing when we go back to the foundation of this is the brain. The foundation of this is not will. It is not desire. It is not strength. It is the brain. When you have frontal lobe damage, you have damage to the executive functioning suite of your brain. Imagine the executive function as the major control center of your brain that dictates things like memory, that is involved in things like aggression, concentration, emotional regulation. So how do you succeed in an educational environment when you have memory difficulties, concentrational difficulties, and you might have behavioral changes that are different? And if people don't see it, they oftentimes relegate it to second class citizen status. People see you get into an accident and they hear you had brain injury and you don't have a dent in your head and you can walk and talk, and they assume everything's back to normal. And that's usually not the case. So I applaud you in your ability to actually advocate and get increased understanding of what's going on, because this is what we need. We need dialogue, we need communication, we need people to understand that when children are hurting, it's usually not this magic turnaround. There has to be a lot of active things put in place. Now, I'd love to hear from Yesenia, if I'm saying it correctly.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. I just wanted to share like with like my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And it have to do with what you're saying, because we used to live in Puerto Rico, mm-hmm. and me and my daughter, my husband, and we have what I would call, we were not rich, but we have an idyllic life. We live in the country. We had an orchard. It was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And we were very in touch with nature and everything. Yeah. That's how she was until it was 3. Then Maria, the hurricane, hit, and we lost everything. So we moved here. She was 3, almost 4. And we just made the decision. We moved here and everything. And I thought, like, she's 3. She's not even going to notice it. Mm-hmm. And all for my surprise,
she noticed everything.
She knew everything. It started like we came here to my sister. We went from being in the open air to being in that apartment. Mm-hmm. And I understood that. Mm-hmm. But she started giving tantrums, and I didn't understand because she was never like that. She was a happy baby. Mm-hmm. Until one day in one of those tantrums that I didn't know what to do with, because I was going through my own grieving, because I didn't want it to leave. In a way, I was made to leave. Mm-hmm. And she said in her little words, "My yellow house, I just want my yellow house." Mm-hmm. And hit me.
Yes.
And yes. I mean, I really thought, in my adult mind, I really thought that she didn't even notice that the hurricane happened. Right. And as time went by, she will verbalize better and say things that I'm like, how she know this? Where did she ever?
Because it meant something to her.
Yes. And it's such a mistake, like you said, it's such a mistake to think that because they're young, they just, okay, I went from A to B and it did not affect me, but it's not like that. She is 6 now, and we're still working on it.
Yes. And then she's now added a new trauma. You see, a hurricane's a natural disaster, and now she's living through another natural disaster, COVID. And part of the hard thing of grief, not only being children, but there's this model that's been propagated, right? It's you're in shock, then you're in denial, then you're angry, then you're bargaining, please, no, 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 no. But then you get really sad and depressed, and then finally you accept it. And once you accept it, the movie ends, and the credits roll and the happy theme music, and you are now a success. The wicked stepmother and everyone accepts you, and you put the slippers on, and your life is golden because you finally accepted all the loss. And this model makes people feel as if what they're going through isn't real. This linear model of grief should be rejected. There are no magic stages that everyone goes through in this way. Sometimes you may be in denial. Sometimes you may be angry, but then you may be sad, and you may go back and forth, and it may happen over a very long time. So what we decided is sort of a model that really encapsulates grief, right? You have the loss and separation, and it impacts the person. It impacts you as the griever, then your life experiences and how you're dealing with it, your shock, your awareness of the loss and separation, your conversations, your withdrawal, your healing renewal. All these things are impacting, but they're also impacted by you internally. How old are you? How old were you when this happened? Your gender, how does society expect you to handle this? Your personality, are you extroverted? Are you introverted? Are you a person that's going to get help? Are you a person that people want to help? Because I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, and people, we're being honest here. If someone is cute and likable and agreeable, they tend to get more help than someone who's not. If someone looks a certain way that we deem as valuable or worthy of support, they will get it more than other people. Are you healthy or are you sick? Are you ambivalent? Are you dependent? All these internal factors are going to impact how you're impacted by the loss. What is your outcome history? Have you had a lot of grief? Have you had successful processing of grief with people supporting you and you still were given the permission to grieve in the way that you wanted? Or was it, chuck it up? We ain't got time for that right now. Stop. You're a man. Deal with it. We got other things to do. What are the external things? What are your social supports? Was it sudden versus chronic? Because there's a difference with death that happens versus someone slowly dying. And neither is better or worse, they're just different. And how are we acknowledging that? What are your relationships? Your relationship with the loss, but also your relationship with other people. Are you alone? What is your socioeconomic status? Are you able to afford a burial if someone dies? Are you able to get food if someone dies? What are the supports? Do people, for instance, recognize it and bring you food? Do people come by to say, hey, I just want to check up on you? Because a lot of times people give a window of support for grief, and then after that window's reached, it's kind of like, well, I don't need to talk to you anymore. So how do we deal? How do we create these environments where we're helping each other? You see, there's common responses and experiences to the trauma, and we have to be aware of these things as we go along. There will be some withdrawal for people. There will be some overactivity where people are acting in ways that they normally wouldn't. There's usually impairment of performance. People do not function optimally when they're involved in trauma. There might be some crying. There might be some seeking or carrying of their reminders. This is something that will happen. There might be some physical manifestations, heart palpitations, being breathless. There might be some physiological increase in motoric expression. By the way, that's just a fancy way of saying you're going to fidget and move around. See, anxiety is expressed in many ways. And sometimes when we have stress, anxiety, or grieving or trauma, and we can't verbally express it, we express it through our body, our movement, or even in pain. So someone might start feeling nauseous a lot. They might have a lot of tummy aches, especially children. They might start having a lot of backaches. These are physiological responses to the stress. A lack of energy, exhaustion, weakness, illness, headaches. And we have to be aware of these and start seeing, okay, when this is happening, we can go to the next slide. Someone is feeling pain and we need to be aware and we need to be there to support. There's going to be changes, cognitive changes. Cognitive is a word that lets you understand that there's meaning making and interpretation with what we're going through. Whenever we experience something, we make meaning of it. We try to figure out what's going on. So there's going to be some change, maybe in assumptive worldview. That is your assumptions of how the world is supposed to go and function. That's been changed for all of us. Because right now, my assumptive worldview was every summer was my travel time. It was time for my family to travel and go and visit other family. I don't make that assumption anymore because I don't know what this summer is going to bring. Executive function difficulties, concentration, attention. How do you concentrate sometimes when you have intrusive thoughts of memories of people you love and lost? Preoccupation with your thoughts or images. If you're involved in something that's being broadcasted on television over and over again, how do you escape that thought? Disbelief, a state of depersonalization and confusion, especially as a child. When you've moved and you're now in the States and you've lost your yellow house, how do you conceptualize that? You don't have the words, so sometimes you behaviorally act out. Emotionally, sadness, yearning, a loss of pleasure. I don't feel good about these things anymore. Shame, feelings of possible hopelessness, sometimes guilt. A lot of times, especially with separation laws, kids will sometimes blame themselves. If I was a better kid, my parents would still be together. If I hadn't said that mean thing, they wouldn't have left and they wouldn't have been hit by a car. Shock, anger, fear, loss of control. These are behaviors that might happen to people and they will go back and forth, and there is no magic one way this happens. Now, those are normal and natural responses. And sometimes people have responses that are even greater and are even more concerned. So, following frightening events, it is possible for people to experience post traumatic responses, and it overwhelms their ability to cope. And this is directly related to something that happens after this event. So, they might have intrusive thoughts, nightmares, avoiding reminders of what happened or associated with the traumatic event. So, they might not want to go in no car. If you've had a bad accident, or if you were on a bicycle and you were hit by a truck, how do you respond when you see a truck? How do you respond when you're on your bike? Images are example of incidents reenacted in art, play, words, or writing. That's why art therapy is a beautiful thing with children. Sometimes they don't have the words for it, but they sure have the art. They have the ability to write it. They have the ability to express it, and that gives them an outlet for the conversation. Changes in behavior. This is huge. When someone had asked about knowing depression or something and they say nothing's happened, but changes in behavior. Are they increasing their agitation? Are they more withdrawn? Are they more oppositional? Are they sadder? When you understand the baseline of a person and there's market change, you might start thinking something difficult has happened to them and I should help. Sometimes post traumatic responses are self harmful thoughts, plans, or actions. And when these happen, that's when you ramp up even more professional help. Because when people want to talk about hurting themselves, this is something that needs further attention. It's not something that just goes away. So what we could do is start thinking of what can we say or what can we do? When people are experiencing trauma and grief, there's a lot we can do. And the focus is on empathy, creating a space where we could talk to them. What to say? I lost my parents when I was your age. That's not what you say. If someone lost a loved one, we don't compare our loss to theirs. We may think that we're saying something like, wow, I'm saying something they feel that I can relate. But they're hearing you think your loss is as bad as mine. And to them, they might be thinking it's not. So what you might say is, tell me more about what it's been like for you. You see, you come from a position of inquiry. You come from a position where you ask, what's this been for you? And that leads to the discussion where you can then start sharing. Oftentimes people are told they need to be strong for their family. It's important to get a grip. It's important to man up. Control your feelings because your feelings make other people uncomfortable. And oftentimes it does. When people are experiencing grief, pain, it makes other people uncomfortable. So when we live in a society where that's the case, grieving children are often told they shouldn't express their feelings. They're told that they should hold back from expressing. They should get over it. They should stop because it's making people uncomfortable. But we should create space where we say, how are you doing? It seems you might have concerns. Are you really concerned about them? How are you feeling? Is there anything I can help you with? When someone expresses a loss that isn't as common, yeah, my dog died last week. I know how you must be feeling. You see, that loss to you is something important. It's uncommon, but it's special to you. But again, we don't compare our losses to other people because you don't know how their relationships are, or how strongly they feel, or how much offense they might take. If I love my mother more than anything in the world, and you loved your mother more than anything in the world, and you say to me, I lost my mother too, I might be thinking, well, you didn't love your mother as much as I love mine. So why are you telling me about yours? So I know how I've felt when someone I love died, but I don't really know how you're feeling. Can you please tell me something about what that's been like for you? You see, these phrases hold open a space that we can start communicating from a space where we're considering what they're going through and not always telling about us. These things that people are going through when they're grieving and experiencing loss are real. They're brain based, they're physiological based, and they're cognitive based. And how we create spaces for them to be open and communicate and talk and be there for each other will be something that changes their lives and ours. So, oh yes.
So we do have a question here in Spanish. So it's actually a statement. Maybe you can share
Yes.
with mom. Es la señora Evelyn Álvarez. Voy a leer su comentario. So I'm going to read it in Spanish first, Dr. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Evelyn García, mamá de Jancy Germán, y sí he notado que mi hijo y yo hemos sufrido mucho. Yo soy más soltera y ahora con lo del COVID más difícil me quedé sin trabajo, no tengo quien cuide a mi hijo y estuve mucho tiempo en clases virtuales, pero trato de animar a mi hijo y explicarle un poco muy difícil. Y sinceramente por el idioma se me hace muy difícil explicarle a mi hijo, pero mi situación no es fácil, tengo que trabajar obligado, yo soy soltera de todo, soy soltera de todo y me siento estresada y mi hijo también. Basically, mom is sharing that her name is Evelyn, and she mentions her son's name, and she has noticed that herself and her family have suffered. She is a single mom, especially now during COVID is very difficult. I'm unemployed now. I have no job. I don't have anyone that can stay with my child. When I was for a while, the student was attending virtual classes. And I tried to encourage him and explain. So pretty much helping him out, but it's very difficult. And sincerely, because of the language barrier, it's very difficult to explain to my child to help him out. But my situation is very difficult. I have to work. I'm obligated to do it. And I'm basically responsible for everything.
Yeah.
I feel very stressed, and so does my son.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We're grieving. We're feeling the weight of a world's amount of problems on our shoulders. And when we don't have spaces where we can talk to other people who we feel are experiencing this too, where our experiences are validated, we feel alone. We feel the weight of all this on us, and we feel as if it's our fault. And we have to start creating spaces where people learn it's not your fault. This is really a difficult situation. The pain you're feeling is a reflection of what's going on, not a reflection of your strength. It's not a reflection of your worth. And we have to create dialogue. We have to create understanding so people, when they're dealing with this, they see it's not just me. Your son is not a bad kid. He's going through a trauma of a pandemic, of losing the supports and the nestled systems that have cradled him throughout this point. And it's going to be difficult to start healing, but the healing process is going to be slow and individual, but we have to be ready for it and make leeway for ourselves when things don't heal at this pace that we want, but also be understanding enough to say, I'm hurting and I need to be understood without blaming yourself. We have a few more people. Do we have time to?
You have a few more people with questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah, we could take the few questions and then we'll make some announcements. And I know Ashley wanted to present something with the program.
Let's go, Ruben, please.
Yes, I was talking to you before.
I remember.
How about if my kids? They said the therapy doesn't work for them, like it's not for everybody, or is it okay to offer them therapy if I see like something wrong going on, even if it's not a lot, but I would like as a parent, I would love my kids to be like the happiest kids, and if I can do anything to help them, I would. And if it is okay, like offer them to look, I can look for therapy for them or things like that. And if it is, where to call, who I'm gonna call, what's number where I can call to get help.
Now, I will say not just because I have a PhD in
Is your
psychology,
feedback going to work?
but what I see is therapy is an incredibly wonderful thing. It is an incredibly unique space where someone actually listens to you 100% without judgment and with actual positive regard. You will learn skills. You will learn ways to process information. You will learn how to cope and to be okay with yourself. If someone says therapy is not for them, I tend to say if you're not feeling well or you would love to get help, what can it hurt? That's again the belief that if something can help me and it is mental, psychological, or emotional, it is not as valid. If someone had a flat tire, no one would walk around and say, having a jack to jack up their car just doesn't seem like something I'm interested in. No one would say, oh, having another tire or being able to patch the leak up and put new air in the tire, I'm just not interested in that. If you drive around on that tire, it's going to get bald and you're going to damage your car. So when people say therapy is not for me, I say you may not have the right match. You may not have worked with a person that could be helpful. But there's always some gems and things that could help you out. There are things in people. You might have to ask questions. You might have to find new people. Find someone a person is comfortable with. But that is a possibility and something that is more common than people realize. A lot of communities, there's a stigma that I have to go to therapy only if I'm hearing voices. And therapy is helpful for a wide range of things, from adjusting to difficulties all the way up. So thank you. I'd love to hear Carmelina.
Carmelina, si tiene una pregunta.
Sí, buenas tardes a todos. Disculpe que hasta ahorita me conecté.
No se preocupe, diga.
Pues yo quería saber de qué se trataba la reunión.
Es la Academia para Padres conociendo el trauma de los niños.
Ajá.
Ya casi estamos terminando.
Ay, Dios mío. Ok, entonces.
Siga escuchándonos, por favor, no se vaya todavía.
Ok, muchísimas gracias.
Si necesita traducción, mire abajo donde dice interpretación y así puede tener acceso a la intérprete. Okay?
Ok, muchísimas gracias.
De nada.
All right. Can we hear from Alice?
Oh, I'm on again.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit the hand up.
Oh, no problem.
But I just want to say I do agree with everything you had just said.
Thank you.
Even throughout this whole session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How about Miss Nadia?
Thank you. Can you,
Nadia,
yes,
I'm sorry. If you can just wait 1 second, let me just make an announcement for everyone because it is 6 o'clock. I just want to make sure that no one leaves because we do have a feedback form that we would like folks to fill out, to give us some feedback about the workshop this evening so we can share back with Dr. Booth. But also, we also have some raffle items we're going to offer folks, so please do not leave us, okay? And we also have other announcements regarding future workshops. Thank you.
Thank you. I want you to touch base if you can about a holistic approach on especially for depression and anxiety on adolescents. I know therapy is very important. I personally take it, my kids do as well. But is there a way that we can, support therapy? And if people take medication for depression in a way that, the food we eat, I know is very important. And, now with the whole COVID thing, a lot of people are going very herbalist and, natural. So is there other things that could, be
utilized? So when you think of depression, depression is sometimes conceptualized in three folds. So you have depression and you have the biological, you have the cognitive, and you have the social. So the biological, how your body changes with depression. You can do things like medication, which will help change your brain chemistry and alter it so that you're able to, especially if you're doing therapy, respond well and get your brain more back to the normal, right? Then there's the physical with the biological. Exercise. So exercise has been shown longitudinally to be almost as effective as medication. So the sweet spot for exercise, for the benefits are 3 to 5 days a week for approximately 45 minutes. So exercise for depression and anxiety is incredible. When you think of the social aspects of depression, if you can exercise in a group or with other people, it actually makes your prognosis better, because a lot of times with depression, there's isolation, there's a pulling back. And by doing something where you're obligated and engaged with others, it actually helps to bolster you socially and keep you engaged so that you're not alone. So we have the physiological with the medication or exercise. Then you have the social, which is the exercise with other people. And then the cognitive. What are your thoughts that are impacting how you feel? And what are things that you're doing to help bolster and change your thoughts? And how are you, and we can switch over to maybe anxiety, for instance. What are the thoughts that are helping you cope and deal with your anxiety? What are the thoughts that you could use to counteract the irrational thoughts? What are some coping skills that you could use? Two coping skills that I tell almost everyone in the world. Breathing exercises. Deep breathing actually changes you physiologically and alerts your brain that it is time to get out of the stress response and start going into the relaxation response. And progressive muscle relaxation. That is a tightening of your body, a holding, and a slow release that creates relaxation in your body and causes you to relax. So when you're looking at helping yourself, there's a lot of things you could do holistically. Get involved with things that give meaning to you. Get out of boxes and spaces. Get into nature if that is valued. Find people, things that you care about and commune with. Exercise. Change how you eat and change how you think and practice coping skills and progressive muscle relaxation. And there's other things, but those are just some quick pointers at the top of our head. And Jess.
Unmute. Hello.
Hello. Oh, your hand was raised.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I am a traumatic brain. I had a severe traumatic brain injury when I was 14. And everything you have said, every single thing people said, oh, she'll get over it, she'll be fine, she'll be this, she'll be that. Yeah, to some degree it was true. I had to learn how to deal with it and cope with it back 30 years ago because no one talked about this stuff. And they told my mom that I wouldn't be able to work in high capacity. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things. But here I am to tell you that although I had to learn how to cope with all of these things you're saying because I was forced to, and I do great. I have a really high position in a job.
Nice.
I have 3 very active kids, and
beautiful.
I don't know, my brain did, I guess, pretty good.
Yeah.
Now having children, I am more alert to all of these things. Or say the school department isn't so, like, even now after 30 years, you think, and all of the research that you guys have and all of this conversation you're having today, I notice that the teachers are still behaving the same way they did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And when I go and I tell them my daughter is feeling this way, this happened, they're not so willing to listen. So how?
Oh, sorry to cut you off. I think
How is all of these workshops and all of this information that you're putting out there to parents good if we still have a system stuck in the old ways?
Right. And that's why we're working with systems and people. You notice when we first started, I said you need it on multiple fronts. You can't have just one isolated group get worked on and learn these things. The stigma of mental health in the field of psychology has been utilized by a lot of companies to understand why humans do the things they do. But when it comes to understanding why people have difficulty in having compassion for them, it hasn't translated into that. It's translated into, I can get you to look at your phone by having a light pop up, right? Or making a bing sound because we've been we associate that bing sound with, oh, that's something that might be for me. And it will get you to look, even if you don't want to. See, that's psychology in practice. But the knowledge of if someone is feeling depressed and that is something that might hinder their ability to do their work is just now starting to permeate, because again, people relegate that to the invisible, and they relegate it to willpower, and they relegate it to value and judgment of worthiness and strength. So we have a big battle where people have to be told over and over again and given this new research and given research, evidence, and say, this is what's going on. It's real, it's real. And when enough people hear, you slowly start seeing change. Again, someone was literally with me as we did object permanence experiments with their child, and they were like, well, I don't believe in it. I'm like, you're seeing it in front of you. So we have to make way and spaces again where we're communicating, talk to each other, and connecting so that different people hear this information. Could we hear from Agnelli, if I'm saying it correctly?
Angeli, no la podemos escuchar. Si tiene alguna pregunta. Angeli, si puede prender su micrófono. Okay.
All right. Then how about Christopher?
Yes, thank you. So I had a question. You had said earlier, you know, some people, you tell them about your loss and then they want to tell you about their loss.
Right.
And how do you, you know, like you're right, it's not helpful when they do that. And my question is, well, how do you then respond to them? Like they're not that they're trying to one up you, or they're like, you know, it brings up, you know, feelings for them, and I try to be compassionate about that. But by the same time, it's not really helpful for me. And so I'm wondering, is there a way to address that?
I think for me, I'm a person that I really believe in being honest and in the moment. So if someone said that to me, I might say, I understand that you're sharing because you think that that will help, but for me, it doesn't. And let it stay like that. Or you might even go further. You know, I feel that when people bring up what they've lost, it takes away from me discussing what I've lost. And I really would like this space to do that. If afterwards you'd like a space where we could do that for you, I would love to reciprocate. But right now, can we please give me this space? Because it's what I need. And Amy. And I hope that helped, by the way.
Amy, if you can unmute yourself.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So I'm a parent, and that's why I got this invitation.
Yes.
But I'm also an educator. And one of the things that I find really troubling and difficult to deal with is when, and I just took my dog for a walk. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. That's beautiful. That's self-care.
Is when children who are already hurting and are already dealing with everything we're dealing with, plus whatever they're dealing with, they heap self-criticism upon themselves.
Yes.
It's a human nature. I know it's hard for me to get out from under that, but it's really hard to watch adolescents being their own worst enemy when they're already having such difficulties. Do you have any words of wisdom for how to teach my students to treat themselves more kindly when that's hard?
I think you hit the nail on the head, right? When people are exposed to trauma, what trauma does is it causes changes in your assumptive worldview. So how you feel the world is. But when you start feeling the world is negative, it also impacts how you feel about yourself and what you internalize. So when you've been traumatized desensitized and exposed to this, you start feeling yourself as less than. You start feeling within yourself that you're not capable. And you will start saying this and sometimes create or engage in activities that reinforce this. If I think I'm going to fail, sometimes it's easier to not try because then I don't get my hopes up. But when you don't try, you fail, and then it reinforces to you that you're a failure. So then when you get an opportunity where you're going to try, you try half-heartedly, which leads to more failure. I think of a backflip. I can't do a backflip. I'm too afraid to do a backflip. They say technically doing a backflip might actually be easier than doing a front flip because you can see where you're going. If you tentatively try to do a backflip, you're going to hurt yourself. You have to go all in with it. I'm not prepared to do that. And that's what happens a lot of times when people have been traumatized. They do not trust that the world will be there to catch them when they try to take that leap of faith, which is called effort, which is called caring. So we have to let people, I work with a lot of inner city kids who think like that. And I will see them and I'll start smiling. And they'll go, "Why are you smiling?" And I go, "Because I see you, young scholar. You've brightened my day." And they look, they're like, "You serious?" I'm like, "Yes." I'm like, "Don't I say this to you every day?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right. Have I lied to you yet?" You see, I remind people of their excellence. I remind them how they brighten my day. When someone says they're not good at something, I go, "You're not? Well, can you tell me something you are good at?" And did you know that being good at something has nothing to do with an innate trait? It has direct correlation to effort. So there's almost nothing that you try hard enough at you can't do. You sometimes just might need to A, improve your effort, or B, improve your communication with someone that could teach you how to do it. You could throw a ball as hard as you can. You could throw a football as hard as you can, but unless sometimes someone teaches you the mechanism for a spiral, it will not go the way you need it to. So using words where you take it away from just them and this intrinsic trait, but you tie things to hard work, to effort, to learning how. I talk to you all the time, like, you know, most rich people aren't smarter than everyone else. They just had better mentors or better opportunities. And they took advantage and they practiced and they worked hard through it. Not saying you're not going to work hard, but if you're working hard and you've never been taught how to take that effort into something higher, you never know it's possible. So that's how I tend to try and build people up and teach them that they're capable and the world is theirs if they work hard enough and find people to believe in them and sometimes get help along the way when they need to. It's not an innate trait. It's not relegated to what you're born with or whether you're worthy or not. And they're worthy of everything. Our kids deserve everything, and they deserve us creating spaces where we could be empathetic and understanding about them. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Booth, and Ashley. Thank you so much. Ashley, I believe you might have wanted to add a few additional comments before we move forward.
I was sharing at the end some of our programs. Familias Unidas is one of those programs that are run in the community. There's a contact number here if that's something that you feel would be beneficial for families. I was hearing a lot of families that were sharing that I think would be a great fit for this. So please take that information down. And we also have another program called Strong African American Families, again, conducted in the community. And there's email information below. So if you would like to take information to get to outreach, please do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ashley, is there a number, and also Dr. Booth, is there a number that we can share with families other than the ones from the two programs, if anyone wanted to reach you?
Yeah, you could, you have my my contact information. You could share my email and my contact information. We also support, we support a group therapy program in school at Gilbert Stewart Middle School and Young Woods. So if families have children that attend either one of those schools, we could connect them for services there. And then we also partner with the school-based mental health project. So we have over 20 schools that we work with partners for that. So you could definitely connect them with me and I would be able to support them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. I don't want everyone to leave, please. We have a feedback form. We would like for you to please complete the feedback form. You are going to find it on your chat. If you can go into the chat, you'll see the link. If you click on the link, you'll be able to complete the link. Also, I want to remind everyone that we do have a raffle. And Jonathan, if you want to proceed. Okay, we're going to share a screen just so that you can see what we're raffling off. The link is not working. Cindy, you said the link is not working? You want to send yours? We're going to send right now the raffle link. So it's in your chat now. It should say, yeah, it's the last one that was just sent. This one now is for the raffle for those of you who are interested in participating in the raffle. And on the screen, you'll see what we're raffling off. Okay, so we have for the first prize, family 4 pack of free admission tickets. Also, second prize, $10 Walmart gift card. Third prize, family 4 pack free admission tickets to the zoo. I'm sorry, so it's not even specific. It's for the zoo. And so even though right now we're in March, these are tickets that you can use now in the summer, and obviously as we're entering the spring. And so also the fifth prize is $10 Walmart gift card, and sixth prize is the Nice Slice $25 gift card. Nice Slice is a pizza place right next to the administration office here near the school department. And so we want to be able to make sure that we can draw some names for those of you who are interested in participating in the raffle. Make sure to complete the form, that link that we just put in the chat. It's only 3 questions, or actually 2 questions, the name, your name, and also your phone number, because we want to be able to call you as soon as we draw the names. So we're just waiting to have you participate. Yes. And then while you do that, I just want to, if you can look at your screen again, you'll see the Spring Parent Academy. These are the workshops that are coming up now for the rest of the month. And so again, on Monday, we have one on self-care during COVID, and it will be a part 1. And then in April, we have a part 2. So please join us for that Zoom. Again, it will be this Monday. It'll be from 6 to 7. There's a little bit of yoga there. So for those of you who are interested in our, would like to know more about self-care, please join us. On the 24th, Planning for Life After High School. And those of you who have students in high school right now, or even in middle school, and would like to learn more about high school opportunities and careers, please make sure to join that workshop on the 24th. Also on the 29th, supporting your child with current art curriculum. So for those of you who have students, obviously either K through 8, this is our curriculum, our literacy curriculum. And so we want to make sure to share more information about what students are learning in school right now and how you can be helpful. And then the last one for the month of March is paying and saving for college. That would be again for folks that are interested in knowing more about some savings programs, and also information regarding financial aid and other information that would be very helpful for all of you who are in that journey right now during the high school years, or even if you have a senior student right now. And so again, we're asking all of you to please, in the chat, we shared, the last link that was shared was the link for the raffle. And if you scroll up, you'll see another link, and that's the feedback form. Okay, so we want to hear from you, and we're going to check is the feedback form, you're receiving responses? Okay. Yep. Yeah, wait, I'll check. So 1 second. Okay. Okay, no. So just do your, if you can, what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna stop we're going to now do the drawing. And so I see some questions here. Go ahead, we're going to, yeah, there we go. If you can, in your, let me see, it says we need permission. It says we need permission to fill out. Okay, 1 second, don't leave. We're gonna make sure that we correct that. We just get one link and it's not working. So there's one that's not working
No, I'm getting this.
for the feedback. So maybe it's, one of them is not working, they're saying.
Let me see that and I'll put it again.
Mhm.
But for the raffle one, that's the response.
Okay, so far we have 2 responses for the raffle. Remember the last link that was sent was the raffle link? Naija, you said you only see one link. If you can scroll up, you'll see one that says feedback form. And we're going to share it again so that could be at the very bottom.